right, well, I'm here to talk to you about CTO levels. If you remember last year, Etienne introduced the CTO levels grid here at 0111. How many people in the room have actually looked at the grid, understand the grid, done an assessment? Great. Okay, so I don't have to do an 101 on what grids is, but okay, so we're going to talk about levels. And I'm going to talk about how to utilize levels to become effective in your organization. The goal with levels isn't really that you go to the grid, figure out what to do, grab the playbook, and go back. It's that you're actually living, eating, and breathing CTO levels, the concepts, in your everyday life. Like, it just becomes natural to you. So we're going to anchor you in some of those ideas so that you can really say, this is who I need to be for my company at this point. Okay. Forward. All right, but before we anchor ourselves in the CTO level grid and what we should do, I think we really should talk about the CTO identity crisis. There's a real harsh reality going on in the technology world. Companies are incredibly messy. Many of us are oblivious to this fact until it hits us over the head. So I want to start by focusing on the sad truth about what technology is really like for a CTO. Because then we can use levels to say, how can we combat that sad truth and be more effective? All right. First off, the first myth is that the CTO's role remains constant regardless of the company size. Hear that all the time, like, I'm just gonna, my investor knows a guy who's gonna be my next CTO, you know, he was a CTO, he'll be fine, right? He'll know it, you know, it doesn't matter that he's never worked at a 400-person company or a $10 million company, right? I just know a guy who knows some tech. That's a total myth. The CTO is not a CTO, is not a CTO. It all depends on the size of your company. Our roles shift and grow as our company grows. And there's a lot of diverse expectations about the CTO role. Responsibilities evolve over time. What we're doing in a small company is completely different than our role in a large company. So the CTO role is really multifaceted. It's a fast-moving object. And so we're going to do a deep dive into helping you guys understand what is your role for the size of company you are right now, to help you better understand how to understand what you need to do next. All right, the next myth is that CTOs are just super coders, right? How many have written code in the last week? Oh, a lot of you. Cool. But there is a myth within executive teams that we're just going to hire some person to go write our code, and that person, we're going to give them a title of CTO because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And so they are the super coder, the uber coder of the organization. And because we're good, there's also another myth here that because we're good at coding and architecting, we're also going to be good at leading that. And what most people don't really realize is that active leading a technology organization is an entirely different career path than actually being the architect or the coder of the organization. So CTOs really need to be strategic leaders and decision makers, and they really need to be partners in the business, and that's a completely different skill set than, checking code in at the end of the day every day. Okay, so there's this really interesting thing that happens at companies. If your company is a tech company, tech is going to get blamed for everything. If you're a services-enabled business, your services team is going to get blamed. And of course, if you're a logistics and operations sort of company, then the logistics org is going to get blamed. Whatever's the most strategic part of the business is the business that when something goes wrong, anything goes wrong, that part of the org is going to get blamed. So us as CTOs, most of us are probably running tech organizations, and so therefore, whether it's our fault or not, we're likely to take the blame. But the truth is that success or failure is always a team sport. It's all about process, communication, interaction. It's really complex. Who is to blame for something is actually really hard to determine. There's also a huge difference between the perception and reality of a CTO role. So imagine this cliff here, right? You can kind of see the little people on the right side. That's you, right? And that wonderful field on the left side, that's all your business partners. And so they're looking over at you and they're saying, oh, you're the coder, you're the Uber coder, or whatever, that's what you do. But they have really no frickin' idea what your job actually is, how complex it is, what you're supposed to do. They don't know any of that. And so they have this misperception of who you are as a CTO and what your organization should do. And there's this massive gap that actually is very hard to overcome. What happens here is that this gap leads to what we call a trust deficit. So every time something does go wrong within the organization, because they don't actually know what you do, every time it goes wrong, a little chip happens within the organization that chips away at that trust. And that over time, that trust gets eroded. And so part of our job is to really ensure that we're building bridges with these organizations and really talking to them in a way that they can better understand and being the educator and the partner. All right, we're going to do a test here. All right, I'm going to draw a line right down here, and I want everyone on this side of the room to stand up. All right, that's probably, what, 50-ish people? All right, I hate to tell you this, but we decided tech is going to go another direction, and you've all been fired. All right, you can sit down now. It was a good visual. How did that feel? No, just kidding. So the truth, well, that's all right. 2 years later, you're all fired, right? So the stats, this is a 2023, Zippia did the study. It's a very detailed study about technology roles for all different levels of roles. Pretty cool if you want to go out and look at it. But their study concludes that 50% of CTOs have a tenure of less than 2 years at their organization. We're actually the most fired executive across the board. Not surprising because of that trust deficit and how we continue to chip away when they don't really understand what we do. What's even more appalling with this is that 1 year of distrust, there's usually 1 year of distrust between the CEO and the CTO before the CTO is exited from the company. So if we only have a tenure of 2 years and there's 1 year of distrust where we're trying to figure out how to put it together, we have very little time when we step into an organization to make a difference, make an impact, and really solidify that trust within the organization. You only have a few months to get that process started. So welcome, good luck living up to the expectations of the CTO. If we aren't moving fast enough, the revenue goals of the company aren't going to get met. And usually no one else in leadership talks tech, so they really don't understand. And so we're left there on an island with no one else to help us, unless, of course, we're in 7 CTOs. Constant stress comes when we don't know how to accomplish a specific new task. I've been doing a lot of coaching for the last several years, and a lot of these people are in complete burnout. And what I find is when we dig down under the surface to find out why they're actually in burnout, the burnout is stemming from the fact that they actually don't know how to evolve their organization. And hundreds of things are coming at them every week in which they don't know the answers to, right? Because we live in a very complex situation in our organizations. And so as our companies grow and it gets harder and harder and we're behind the game over and over and over again, that weight of all the things we don't know how to do and the fact that we haven't resolved those is leading to this burnout. I can't tell you how many CTOs I know who say, I just don't want to ever work for a company again. Tell me how to be a fractional CTO again, right? Because somehow that's going to avoid this burnout. So our role in the technology we build is very complex. It's I can't even read my own notes. It takes a sustained focus and proactiveness to really not get ourselves into this hole where we're absolutely burned out. I'm going to start a story here, and then I'll tell you the end of the story later. So I've been coaching a CTO. He had about 30 people on his team, about a $30 million company. And the first words out of his mouth were, "I don't even know what it means to be a CTO." He was the lead engineer, got promoted, much like Madison's story, promoted to VP, promoted to CTO, and here he is now at a $30 million company with 30 people on his team, and he's like, I don't even know what a CTO does. Total burnout, total burnout. He was like, I can't even get up in the morning. It's really hard to get up in the morning, and they want me to figure this out, right? And so that's how our coaching started. I'm going to come back to this story again, because we did use CTO Levels with him, and so at the end I'll tell you where he is today. All right, so let's talk about the 4 focuses for the CTO. So this is where we're getting into CTO Levels work. So we're going to ground ourselves in these common understandings, and then we're going to use them as we go through the rest of the presentation. So the CTO level framework is grounded in the belief that there's 4 main focuses in the CTO role. These are the actions and the movements that the CTO makes within the engineering organization, and these are speed, stretch, sales, and shield. So I'm going to dive deep into this so that we all understand them. And I want you to, as I go through these, to think about if you say, well, there's a 5th one, right? Is there really a 5th one, or is it part of one of these? Okay, so speed. We need to deliver technology as efficiently and speedy as possible. Our job is to deliver the value for the business. It's not to make great tech. It's not to constantly refactor what we do. It is to deliver value for the business as fast as possible. How many people in this room hear this from their CEO every month? Well, probably more than half the room. We got to go faster. We got to go faster. Why aren't we going faster? Especially now when we're in kind of like a soft time within the tech industry, right? Got to go faster. How many people get stressed out from this? Yeah, all the same people. All right, so what happens with technologists today is when you tell them that they need to go faster, what they hear, what we hear, is you need to code faster, right? Well, that's not possible. Code takes what code takes. The way to go faster is to optimize everything around how you code, which is where CTO Levels framework comes in. And I've been through like lots of rapid growth. We talked about how a lot of the companies I've worked at have been acquired. Most of those were highly successful. Most of them are still in production. And what I've easily been able to do by putting clear frameworks and processes in place is to get 3 to 5x acceleration on our ability to deliver, and no one had to code faster. And that really is about the processes, the frameworks, the way in which you fine-tune everything that you do around the coding that your team is doing. So think about that. How would you today get 3 to 5x speed improvement in the next 30 days? What would you need to do? All right, so the next focus area is shield. When we're shielding, our job is, when we shield the business, is to protect our business from internal and external threats. Think of things like resiliency, compliance, security first thinking, defensive processes and procedures, incident response plans. So it's incredibly important for us to think about just not checking it in, phoning it home on our security. I don't know, did anyone hear the results of the SolarWinds article over the last couple weeks? I think it came out, where the CISO has taken all the blame now for the SolarWinds incident from like 4 or 5 years ago, right? And it was really because he was just phoning it in. Here he is a CISO, he's in charge of security compliance, And the findings were that he was like, oh, it's checkmark process. Compliance is just checkmark. I've heard that at like 90% of the companies I've worked for. And our job is not to make it be a checkbox. Our job is to think from the very beginning about how we're going to bring security and compliance into our processes so that we're protecting our organization from threats. Because if we're not protecting them and something happens, we're going to be in that 50% that gets fired. All right, the third one is sales. Most technologists, when you say your job is sales, they go, I hate sales. My husband used to be in sales, and I always told him that. But the truth is, sales happens in everything that we do as a leader. It's about participating actively and aligning cross-functionally within your organization. Your job is to work with your peers, who are the other C-suites, to really move the company forward to gain more revenue, gain more customers. And a lot of that requires negotiation, influence, collaborating with sales and marketing, understanding the marketing process, understanding where sales can be more effective and better enabled by technology, right? So how can you have those conversations with them and sell to marketing department that maybe we should do something a different way to help you be more effective at what you do, right? So our job is really that salesperson within the organization. Sales starts at the beginning of your software development lifecycle with your product briefs. How do you negotiate? What is the priority, right? How do you document what you're doing so that everyone understands what they're getting, right? So our job as a salesperson is not just about going out to customers and selling our product to customers and having a good elevator pitch. It's like selling our ideas, to the CEO. And then, of course, the last one is really stretching ourselves. That's why we're all here today. That's why we're all part of 7 CTOs, is to really challenge ourselves and our teams to grow. And we don't want to grow in spurts, right? We want to grow every day in everything that we do. Little micro changes that help evolve us and push us forward. I really do believe that if we want to be in a growing company, we have to be uncomfortable almost all the time. If we're not uncomfortable, are we really growing? So how do we stay in that discomfort? How do we stay authentic to ourselves? Where are we resisting growth? I know a lot of CTOs that I run into in my coaching are like, yeah, this is working, this is not working. This thing over here is not working. I'm like, it's not been working for 2 years. Well, what are you doing about it? Well, that's their job. That's their responsibility. It's sales' responsibility. I can't influence sales, right? No, our job as a CTO is to say, this is not working, sales. How can I help you resolve this? Because that's going to help us be more efficient as an organization. And that's really uncomfortable to go to sales and say, hey, I think we need to evolve. And they're going to be like, I don't need to do anything different, right? So how do you work through that? And that's really about being uncomfortable and stretching ourselves. All right, so those are the 4 focus areas. Now let's look at the 3 personas of a CTO. This is another part of the CTO levels. Now, Zaina, you're going to have to tell me if these are good, what was it? Casual power looks. All right, so hopefully you guys will get some ideas for your casual power looks out of the next few slides. But we really want to ground ourselves with who we are as a CTO in the stage of company that our company is at. Okay, so after I go through the next 3 slides, I'm going to expect everyone to know where you fall. Sound good? All right. So the first one is the start CTO. I want one of these hats, by the way. The start CTO is the person who's wearing the technical hat. So some of you are in here talking about your coding. The start CTO typically has under 10 people. They're often doing hands-on development. Companies are in early stages. They're definitely not at product market fit yet, but they're somewhere along that path. If the CTO isn't directly involved in coding, then they're definitely architecting, directing, very hands-on tactically into the process. And they're setting the foundation for their technical stack and laying all that architectural groundwork to make the company happen. These people need to be resourceful and flexible. And they need to learn and evolve rapidly, but the challenge is that many of them are senior engineers, staff engineers, principal engineers, not very far away from that role. And yet they have to learn rapidly to do things as a CTO that they've never done before. All right, so your company gets bigger, and you move to the phase of the sprint CTO. So that is typically 20 to 100 people on your team as tech, and your job is to move fast. You're sprinting because your company is in the growth stage, right? So your company is growing faster than your team can likely deliver on the mission. They're building teams. They're starting to put leadership underneath them. So they're moving from more of a doer to a delegator. They're focusing on hiring, training, mentoring, so really wearing that manager hat. And they have to take more of a process orientation where they're implementing processes and methodologies that scale, such as like Agile and performance metrics and things like that. And they also have to start being that cross-functional department liaison. The start CTO, there aren't really departments in your organization, but at this point, you do start to get departments, you do start to get to have other peers. And you all have to start working together. And then, of course, there's the over 100 people. That is the scale CTO. They are really wearing the strategy hat. They're looking out into the future, 2-3 years. Where is your company going? They're focusing on that long term. And they can't get bogged down in the tactical day-to-day. That's why they have right-hand people that help them do that, right? They're definitely not coding. I know some CTOs that have 400 people in their team and they're still coding. And those companies are really struggling, right? This CTO, sales becomes really important. They have to understand their market. They have to understand what their customers need. They have to stay ahead of the market. So when we're talking about how do you bring AI into your organization and when, they need to be thinking about that on a regular basis. They also need to be influencing the culture of the organization and the culture within their industry, like starting to influence how your industry works, how to move it forward. All right. So I've told you the awful truth about the role that you're all going to get fired at some point in the next 2 years. No, you're not. I've grounded you in the 4 focuses and the 3 personas. So let's talk for a minute about complexity. Because I think for us to really understand complexity, that we operate in a complex environment is incredibly important. So how many people here feel that they really understand and live as a systems thinker? Oh boy, I got like less than 10, and most of them are like, All right, so I truly believe that you need to be a strong, effective systems thinker. You need to be able to see the system through the trees, right? Systems thinking is the mindset that focuses on how all the parts interrelate in the system and how those systems work over time within the context of larger systems. So your engineering department is a system. Your software development lifecycle is a system. Your CI/CD process is a system, like systems of systems of systems. And your company is a system of other systems, the sales system, the marketing systems, right? So you've got layers and layers of complexity, and then you're trying to move objects through these systems, right? And we have to think about how all those objects that move through these systems compete for the resources within that system. And when something gets blocked, how it affects the system downstream, right? So as CTOs, we need to be able to see the objects, and we need to see the system, and we need to see the blockages, and we need to resolve them. Like, you need to do that every day, right? So this is why systems thinking is so incredibly important, and we have to build that skill to see the system and the trees. We have to see beyond the surface, right? So this is actually a pretty simple system when it comes to how we think, but we need to see those issues. We need to also understand how feedback loops happen within the system. So every time you say no to sales, oh, that's not well defined, I need it to be better defined, you're actually giving feedback to sales, who's now got to go back into their system and redo the work and come back to you with a better definition, right? So we need to think about the feedback loops. Are we saying no because it's really no, or are we saying no because we just don't want to do it? You know, do we really want to send that feedback into the system, or do we want to optimize it at this stage and keep it going forward, right? Because that's what's best for the company. So feedback loops and understanding how the actions we take impact other parts of the system, both positively and negatively. So there's positive feedback loops, which are really about amplifying change, making things move fast, but also you can make positive changes on the system that can tank the system, make it smaller, or make it less effective. And the negative feedback loops actually calm the system, right? So, hey, maybe we should make our SDLC process a little simpler, right? Because that calms the system. It's too complex right now, right? So we have to think about whether we want to amplify, make the system bigger, or whether we want to make it smaller. We also need to untangle complexity. So this is one thing I see often, is this tangled, the gray one on the left, the tangled mess. That's our system that we typically build as a startup. Like, let's just patch everything together and make it all work, right? We have to be actually untangling the complexity of our system on a consistent basis so that as our company is growing, we're not pulled down by the tangled mess that's living beneath us, right? So every time you wait and don't change the system, even though you know there's a blockage, you're actually making it much more difficult to change it in the future. So think about how you're untangling the complexity of your organization on a daily basis. All right, so let's talk about CTO levels. I think of CTO levels as like this lighthouse, like the beacon of light in the storm. Etienne's laughing back there, right? So you've got these waves crashing around you in the fog, and you can barely see, right? But there's that light out there, and you're like, I know somebody else knows how to do this, right? So who else can help me do it, right? So that's the whole point of CTO levels, is to give you that beacon that you can say, hey, somebody else has done that, and I'm going to figure out what they did, and I'm going to put it into action now, because that'll help me accelerate my ability to untangle that complexity. All right. So this is CTO levels. This is the grid. Mostly what we showed a year ago, a couple little things different. So Etienne created this over, I don't know when you started creating this. I know I saw it for the first time last year. In the last year, we've actually dived deep into it. If you actually go to ctolevels.com/learn, follow the link to framework, you can see the whole framework, all the block definitions, lots of playbooks been built. It's still a work in progress. But we're making the whole framework available to everyone to be able to get in there, find that beacon, find that light, find your problem, and get to work faster putting it into action. Here's how it works for those of you who weren't here last year. First you're going to do is you're going to determine your company level. So that's based on your tech budget, your team size. So let's say you're a 18-person company, 18-person tech team, and your budget's right around $3 million. Your company would be a level 4. Then you assess your team on all the blocks up to level 4, up to and including level 4. And we have assessments for these. We have easy, quick assessments. We have deep assessments. Deep assessments take us 2 to 3 hours right now to really dive in with you. A lot of you have done those deep assessments. And we give you a red, yellow, green rating in each block. So speed, stretch, shield, and sales, every block from level 0 to level 4 would be assessed for a level 4 company. You're going to end up with a bunch of red, yellow, greens. And then, based on the reds and yellows, you're going to build an action plan, right? So if I have an issue with deployment, automated CI, I see a lot of start CTOs skipping that. I can put off automation, right? And then you get to level 4, but you've put off automation and you're red. What you're doing is you're actually pulling yourself down. You're holding yourself back. That's when, remember when I talked about that 3 to 5x efficiency gains? Every red and yellow block down there is pulling you backwards. It's preventing you from being as successful and as speedy as you could be, right? So you want to look at those action plans and you want to put those action plans into practice. The idea is you're always evolving your organization and growing. All right, so how many of you are start CTOs? Okay, cool, maybe 15-ish? All right, so this is for you. Your job is to build strong foundations. Establish all the components of the system. Ensure that your foundation is strong, right? You want to be as proactive as you can be to evolve your foundation as you're building features, right? Because what happens in startups is like, I don't want you to build those, I don't want you to fix our tech debt, just build this other 10 features that we need today to be able to sell the product, right? And you have to figure out how to balance that and continue to evolve your framework. And so you really need to be looking at those blocks, those 16 blocks, on levels 0 through 3 to ensure that you're delivering and building this foundation. We want to see all those blocks be green for the effective startup CTO. And you know, you have CTOs in this room who are not startup CTOs. They're sprint or scale, right? And those are the people that can help you when you don't know how to do these things, or you can go to the CTO Levels framework. Maybe there's a playbook. So let's just talk about an anti-pattern that I see for start CTOs. So I love Midjourney, by the way. Okay, so if you're only working on features and you're patching and you're moving as fast as you can and you're not building your foundation, you end up with the house on the left. It's really rickety at the bottom. It's kind of a mess. Things are falling off. There's 20 different styles, 20 different design patterns to that house, right? And by the time your company gets to be a $10 million company, guess who's getting fired? You. Because you've built this thing that's ground to a halt, right? And you haven't nurtured your foundation to grow with the company, right? You're too far behind. So they're going to bring in someone with more experience, right? It's probably why those 50 CTOs, 50% get fired. So this is the most common failure point. I work with a lot of early stage startup CTOs, is just saying, I'll do that later, right? I'll do my automated testing later. I'll put my CI/CD in later, right? So your job is to really make the house on the right. You're still adding to it. But over time, every time you're touching something, you're making it better. And over time, you're going to build that strong foundation that makes that house ready to scale. All right. So who's a sprint CTO? So remember, that's 20 to 100 people on your team. Okay, that's about a third of the room. Okay, so your job is to orchestrate and fine-tune. You're going to align, integrate, collaborate, delegate. You're the orchestrator. You're the conductor of the orchestra, right? You want to be in flow. You want to shift from being the doer to the director. You want to establish robust processes. You want to scale your infrastructure. You want to make it more reliable. You want to protect it. That's where this is where compliance comes in, security and compliance. You're starting to ensure that you're protecting because you now have customers on your system. You're at product market fit, probably. You're scaling your team. Someone comes to you and say, hey, we just got $40 million of investment. What was it? I think it was Lou. I'm going to 8X my team. Is that something like that, right? 10X. He was told to 10X his team, like, with this investment. It's like, oh, well, that's not going to work. Like, I don't even have hiring processes. I don't have a performance review process. I don't know what I don't even know what I need, right? So your job is to be ahead of the game here and orchestrating and conducting and determining how they know what to do next, right? So your anti-pattern is you're the doer, right? The doer is the start CTO, but if you stay in that role too long, you're gonna be the person that gets exited at the sprint stage, right? You have to move from doer to leader. Our job is not to go into the deep details and fix what's going on with Team A. My job is to orchestrate Team A through Team D and make sure they're all working in harmony and everyone is happy and everyone's making their estimates and delivering value on a regular basis. My job is to walk around and make sure you have what you need, that I'm removing the blockages from you so that you can actually deliver, right? So making this transition is hard for a lot of CTOs, right? It's really a different job. All right. And then scale CTO. How many scale CTOs? Maybe a little less than 10? All right, so you're wearing the strategy hat. You're guiding the ship. You're thinking way out. What direction am I going to go? Who should I acquire? Due diligence becomes really important for you and them, right? You're at a mature stage. You've delegated down to a team of people who really know how to do the sprint level, right? And now you're at the scale level and you're saying, okay, I trust them to do the day-to-day, and I'm thinking 3 to 5 years out. You have to anticipate the market and everything, right? So think of yourself as that person that's guiding the ship and looking beyond the company. You got things here like partnerships. Who are you partnering with? Like I think a couple years ago I put 2 multi-million-dollar white labeling agreements in place with really well-known companies. That was my job, was to like think about how can I like double or triple the company's revenue as a technologist, right? I need to be thinking and bringing those ideas to the table. When I see inefficiencies within the organization, like the company's now 400 people, and it takes 5 months to get performance reviews through. Like, that's our job to say, no, we can't stand for that. We need to fix it. It's not working for engineering. Let's come up with a better way. So we need to be like thinking how we can evolve that system to be as efficient and effective as possible. All right, so your anti-pattern is you're myopic. Boy, my T-Max brought this problem to me. I'm just going to go focus on that problem for the next 3 months, right? Because that's a bad problem, and that's a comfort place, right? That one, I know how to fix that problem. Let's re-architect X. What was it, Frank? Let's move from Postgres to Mongo. That's like a myopic approach, right? Because that's our comfort area. We know how to fix that problem. We don't know how to triple revenue, right? So we want to be thinking expansive. We want to be thinking about the big things. How can we not go directions that are squirreling us into things that don't matter and costing the company billions or millions? at that point to switch to Mongo and then only switch back, right? We need to be thinking expansively about where do we need to go and doing the due diligence and the research to make sure it's the right decision. All right, so let me summarize this, what we learned so far. There's 4 focus areas: speed, stretch, shield, and sales. And the job of the systems thinker is to master the art of how to balance all these. Because I hear all the time when I talk about these 4, well, if I go fast, then I'm actually not protecting the company. So how do I make that decision? And it's not an either-or thing. You have to do all 4 of these in everything that you do every single day, right? These things are not siloed from each other. They are, we have to ebb and flow through them, and we have to figure out how to apply them and make the decisions that say, yeah, I might put this at risk for a short period of time, but this is how I'm going to protect us in the meantime, right? So we need to think about how we balance all these and make them work. All right, then I give you your 3 personas. I don't know, I personally think these are my, I want to put on that hat because I love, when I close my eyes, I think of myself as probably the sprint CTO. So we need to deeply understand our persona and what's required of us. Are we in the right space? Are we actually a scale CTO who's trying to do a startup as a start CTO? Well, maybe that's like not a good fit for you, right? That's not where you need to be. I know a lot of start CTOs who think, I'm just going to go be a sprint CTO, and they're almost all red on their assessment, right? Well, you're not ready. You need to go back and rebuild those. We've been using CTO levels to help a company hire their next CTO. And what's been fascinating is how many level 10 CTOs are applying for a level 6 company job, right? Because they realized I really didn't master the scale CTO, so I need to come back to the top of the sprint CTO and start the process again. I need to get better at it, right? So it's been fascinating to just see that process in action. You know, we have enough challenges facing us every single day as a CTO. We don't need to add to it the complexity of learning, you know, pieces from another CTO persona's role. That's when we actually need to partner with somebody. If you're a start CTO and someone says, we want to do an acquisition, well, your first job should be to call a scale CTO and say, how do I do an acquisition? What do I do? Please mentor me, right? So don't think you need to master all of the things on the grid. Master your phase so that you're prepped and ready to grow to the next persona when your company grows. So I want to see all of you. I want to know what your personal development plans are based on, you know, how strong and stable you feel in your area and what you're working on. We should all have personal development plans. How do we make ourselves better? How do we grow? How do we strengthen our teams? How are we ready for where our company needs to be when it moves to the sprint level? And our teams should all have personal development plans too. All right. Then we talked about the framework. You all know where it's located. We reviewed how it worked. So let me finish the story of the CTO who was in total burnout. So fast forward 12, 14 months. I put CTO levels into action with him during my coaching. He'd bring me a problem. This is insurmountable. I don't know how to do it. This is stressing me out. I don't know what to do. And we'd say, hey, there's this playbook. Go put this into action. We revamped his whole leadership structure. We revamped his software development process. We put new agendas in place for his leadership team. We helped him influence the org to bring goal setting, OKRs, into the company. The company was doing no goal setting. How they got to 30 million, I don't know. And we just systematically said, hey, what's your problem? What does the framework say that we should do? And then let's put it into action. So we're now 12, 14 months ahead. He is not in burnout anymore, self-proclaiming. He's actually excited to go to work. His CEO did his review about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and he says, thank you, not only have you transformed yourself and your organization, but you've transformed this company, right? And all he needed to do was to figure out how to solve the problems he didn't know how to solve, right? And so CTO Levels is one way to do that. Your people in your forums and your groups and in the community are another way to do that. Finding someone who's ahead of you, who can pull you forward. You know, that's how we get past burnout as a leader, right? And of course, sometimes there's places where you can't get past it because the company is dysfunctional. But that is, again, something. How do I decide when I should leave, right? So getting partners to help you make that decision. Yeah, so that CTO, very happy. His company just got acquired, 70 million company now, 70 million ARR. His team is now 90 people. He's happy, he's excited, and he's not in burnout anymore. And so, like, there's a path to get there. All right. So I'll leave you with my favorite quote. I think I gave you this quote last year, too. We just need to decide what path we're going to follow. Are we going to stay in the mire of things that aren't working, systems that are blocked? Or are we going to say, I need to fix this blockage because it's going to make everyone happier, it's going to make the company grow faster. We need to figure out what path we're going to follow and then follow it. And I'll tell you, you are following a path. Whether it's a good path or a bad path is, you know, up for you to decide, but we're all following a path. And so the question is, what are you using to navigate yourself on that path? Are you on the path that's going to help you grow with your organization, or are you on the path that in 2 years is going to get you to be a statistic, right? So think about what path you're following. We don't want anyone to be a statistic here. All right, questions?
How and where do we get to the assessments?
How and where do you get to the assessment? So today, there is a quick assessment. We're about to put out a new quick assessment, which is pretty cool. Etienne and I have been working on it. That's right on the front of the website. We are also building block level assessments. So if you feel like you're stuck on a particular block, we'll be able to give you a very deep assessment of just that block. So we're furiously working on those today. And then also we can get on a phone call and do a manual assessment, which I know a lot of you have been doing during our pilot of this. Those do take a couple hours, but you can get a very detailed assessment in a couple hours with an action plan. So look for a lot of this stuff to evolve very quickly in the next couple months.
Hey, Kathy, next question. For the CTO levels, I think a reality for many of us is over the last year, we've had reduction in budget, reductions in headcount. So let's say you're at a CTO level, we're at a CTO level 8. You've mastered many of the things in that level, and then you become smaller. How do you view this in light of those reductions?
Yeah, so let's say you went from a level 8 company to a level 5 company, right? You really want to go back and shore those things up. What happens during layoffs is some of your best people and your best knowledge walks out the door. There are always gaps that you have. There's always lack of documentation is not up to date, you know, not a lot of automated process. Only Jane knew how to test this one area that we manually test. You want to be looking for those things at that lower level that you can shore up, right? And of course, you want to have proactively already had those in place, right? So that the RIF is actually not impacting your organization, but you will find that, like, all of a sudden I don't have a product team anymore. Like, I've had that happen at a company before where all of product got let go.
So your example going from an 8 to a 5 now, let's say we develop some good partnerships as a level 8. You don't automatically just take hands off partnerships when you drop down to 5. You have to be selective about what makes sense
Yeah.
strategically.
Yeah, so if you're a level 8 CTO, that's great. You actually want to be at a level higher than where your organization is at, because what's happening is you're pulling your organization forward versus hindering your organization from growing, right? So if you were a level 8 CTO at now a level 5 company, your job now is to rebuild, right? So think about operations and budget, your capabilities, right? Because your company lays off, but they still want to be back at that level that they were at. So how do you pull them back up? What is the new things you need to put in place in those blocks? And then you want to stay as a level 8 CTO, right? Because that's what pulls the org forward.
How do you handle when the business or your CEO or whoever you're working with kind of pulls you to the upper levels multiple times? How do you shift your focus to address those needs while also addressing the needs where you at the level you are actually at?
Yeah. So I see this a lot where like you're a level 2 CTO, let's say, and all of a sudden compliance comes in, which is level 5. That's a really common scenario, right? All of a sudden we're closing a deal with Fidelity, and I need a full compliance process in place, and I need us to have the SOC 2. Well, that doesn't happen overnight, right? And if you've never built a compliance program, you have no idea what to do, and it's a super complex thing, right? So the first thing I would do if I was you would be go out on 7 CTOs and say, who can help me, mentor me to build a compliance program, right? Go find someone who understands that problem and can solve that problem, and have some really focused conversations with them. You might also find that you need to bring in an advisor. Okay, I can do that thing. The CEO is going to pull me up to a level 8 thing, partnership, right? We're going to put a multi-million-dollar partnership. You've never done that. It's super complex too, right? So you can say, I have this person I know, and can we pay him a few $1,000s a month to advise us on how to do that well? That'll teach me, right? But it'll also help us move faster into what you're needing. So you just need to think about, how do I leverage the people around me to pull yourself and your company forward? What you don't want to do is just sit in not solving the problem or trying to figure it out yourself. You can't know everything. You can't be a scale CTO magically. It takes decade, probably.
So at Sunstone, it's a 50-person company, but I'd say in the first year that we were at Sunstone, when we were building everything from the ground up, I found it very difficult to figure out what is the purpose, like what is the CTO position, because there's the in-house team, but because we work with banks, we have a lot of compliance requirements. So a lot of my time was spent doing security and compliance, and because we didn't have an in-house team, we had a lot of vendors. We are like SOC compliant. There's like audits every couple of months, right? So these things aren't really value add to the actual, business in regards to the bottom line. But if we look at, the requirements of whether it's a sprint CTO or a start CTO, there's like aspects of a higher level that are part of this lower level CTO, right? And how do you factor that into the CTO levels?
So here's the hard truth.
Oh, sorry, one other thing is
Go ahead.
that the budget for the engineering team is now reflective of like all these partners we've onboarded
Yeah.
in order to have security and compliance. So the team budget is way higher, but the team size internally is way lower. So it
Yeah.
just kind of throws off this leveling system.
Yeah,
I
so
find.
your team size is smaller, but your budget is much higher because you've got all these packages and vendors and stuff
Yeah,
like that. Okay, so here's the thing. Your job is all the blocks. Doesn't matter where you're at. The question is just, what is your primary focus blocks? And then how do you get the support for the other blocks where you don't have the skills, right? So, I've been in a company that was a level 3 company, and I had to do acquisitions, which is, up around level 8. I can't see it from here, yeah. And And so how am I going to get the support I need to do that? And you might find that I think you're a tech-enabled services company or a credit union, right? So it's tech-enabled services is a little different than,
So are you guys talking about Sunstone?
yeah,
We're a two-sided marketplace.
two-sided
between
marketplace.
Banks
Okay.
and businesses.
Banks and
Yeah.
businesses. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of these industries have complexity that needs to come in earlier. So fintech, health tech, a lot of times the compliance block gets moved down the process. So you have 3 people on your team, but you're doing a SOC 2 compliance. Like, you have to do
Exactly.
that, right? Like, no one says this is cast in stone. It's just understanding that that might be unique to your situation. And so the grid is a little different for you. There might be blocks that you have to adopt and learn faster than other blocks. But all the blocks are the job of the CTO. The question is just how often are you doing it and how much of an expert do you need to be at it? And if you're focusing on those blocks that you don't know and letting the others atrophy, you're going to find that your foundation erodes,
Yeah.
right?
I
And you
also
don't
think-
want to erode that.
Yeah, I also think getting buy-in from the rest of the company is really hard when you're like, no, we can't have things in a spreadsheet, our whole database can't be in a spreadsheet. And they're like, well, we're a startup. Why do we need all these, standards in place? But
Yeah, so now you're in the negotiation and influence
Exactly.
blocks, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so nothing here is perfect, like I said, we live in a complex system, and even utilizing levels is complex. It's not super simplistic, just follow the level, but you still need to always be strong at the blocks that are your level, and you need to get support for the blocks that are above where you are, right? And the more you get support and get mentored and pulled into that, that's going to pull you up as a CTO, because you're going to get experience that you've never had before.
Thank you, Kathy.